Stephen.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. By way of introduction, my name is Stephen Mathern, and I am the industry vice chair for the ACT-IAC Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest. And welcome to 2025. I think this is our first event that we're hosting as part of the N&T Community of Interest, or COI, and excited to bring to you I think what will be a really interesting session today. But before we get into that, and I do want to talk a little bit about the mission of ACT-IAC and the Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest. And for those of you new to ACT-IAC and the N&T COI specifically, ACT-IAC represents one of the best use cases or best organizations for facilitating engagement between industry and government. And perhaps the mission of ACT-IAC is never more important than when we're experiencing transition inside of government. This is a prime example of when conversations can occur, perspective can be passed on, in strong work between industry and government, in an impartial environment can be conducted. The N&T COI will engage in several projects throughout 2025, and one of the things that I want to take advantage of this time for is to talk just a little bit about some of those projects, with the intent clearly to garner interest. The work of ACT-IAC and the N&T COI is performed by volunteers, both on the government side and the industry side, and so the products and the projects that we produce and work on against require folks to volunteer to support those endeavors. With respect to 2025, we do have an ongoing work project related to TDM retirement. We also have a project that's ongoing in collaboration with the acquisition community of interest, really focused in on GSA's NG&I future vehicle and a task force that they've spun up. And last but certainly not least, we have a project coming up in 2025 to look at modernizing federal networks from the campus and beyond. That's one that I'm personally engaged in. And to the extent these projects resonate with you, whether you're on the industry or government side, I would encourage you to get engaged, raise your hand, and volunteer to support some of these efforts. Moving beyond today's session, we do have a panel coming up relative to AI and its impact on networks and infrastructure. That is scheduled for April 2nd, 2025. So a lot of strong activity for the N&T COI and a lot of activity in support of ACT-IAC overall while we work through the administration's transition actions. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is transition to today's session. So Renata, if you want to, there we go. For today's session, we're really excited to have Juan Ramirez. So Juan Ramirez is the director of the 5G cross-functional team inside of DoD, and we're excited to have you on. I'm going to very briefly read some information about your background and what you do. But as the director of the 5G CFT, Juan provides technical policy expertise, programmatic oversight, and broad guidance to synchronize and integrate 5G into defense-wide programs and achieve DoD's digital modernization strategy and initiatives. So that's what Juan likes to tout publicly in written word relative to his role, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about what he's engaged in doing. And then last but certainly not least, we've got a star moderator for today's session, and Tom Temin. So Tom, certainly a stranger to no one here in the federal market, and certainly anyone that lives in the national capital region. Tom supports the Federal News Network and hosts the Federal Drive show. So Tom, thank you so much for supporting us this morning in this engagement and the work you do in support of communications relative to all things federal for those of us in this market. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Juan. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Stephen and Juan. Good to have you with us this morning. I was thinking, I sent you, we exchanged a long list of questions that are bulleted. So maybe we should exchange our 5 bullet points of what we each did this morning before we
Exactly.
start. But I'm sure you accomplished a lot for the for the federal government, even if you don't want to bulletize them for us. I'm telling people, go ahead and answer it. Give them 100 bullets and give them something to chew on, and then spend a couple days doing that. But let's get to the team that you lead, the 5G cross-functional team in DoD. Give us a sense, in English, of what the mission and scope of that team is.
Yeah, definitely, Tom. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, and especially on behalf of our acting CIO, Ms. Leslie Beavers. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to talk 5G. I'm excited to talk about our cross-functional team. As most people know, I get jazzed about this, and I start to talk really fast because I get excited. So, welcome on this crazy journey that is 5G with us. But to your point, who am I? What do I do? And this great team that I'm very fortunate to lead. So my name is Juan Ramirez. I am the director for the 5G cross-functional team. In a nutshell, I am responsible for operationalizing 5G technologies and Open RAN across the department. In addition to that, and I'm sure you know, once you do a great job, they just start to add more and more things to you. I'm also the lucky one who's been charged with developing and implementing 5G standards and actually implementing the 5G standard strategy for the department, as well as serving as the US co-chair for some NATO standards interoperability that we're seeking, as well as partnering with our Five Eyed Nations and being the US principal to look at secure mobile wireless communication techniques within the department. So at a very top level, that's what I am, that's who I do, and that's what I support. Just a little bit about the CFT itself. We are a SecDef empowered organization. And for those of you who are watching the DepSecDef hearing, we actually got a shout out. So I'm really excited about that, just to see that the great work that we're doing, not only within the department, is actually getting traction and is actually getting viewed outside of the department, which is great. But again, as I said, we are a SecDef empowered organization. We are one of 4 remaining CFTs. And we were mandated in the FY21 NDA to assist in determining how DoD component roles and responsibilities within the acquisition, sustainment, and operation of 5G networks would function. The cool thing with the CFT is we are not just one organization. So we're not just represented by either DoD CIO or just R&E. We are actually comprised of support from R&E, our research and development folks, as well as our acquisition and sustainment folks, to looking at wrapping in DIU. So from a rapid acquisition path to having joint staff support, so getting that COCOM view, as well as having the services embed actual personnel within our organization so that they function as that conduit between the services actually defining the requirements and actually having those gaps and actually bringing it back up to the front so that we can actually go forward and execute this plan. Overall, we were signed out by a DevSecDef memo that established the CFT back in October of 2021, and it established 19 terms of reference. So a lot of great things that are captured under there, and sometimes you get into the minutia of it, but at its overall heart, the objectives that we are trying to accomplish are we are here to establish and sustain 5G telecommunication capabilities that are required for US military superiority. We enable modernization of the DIB telecommunications infrastructure. And overall, we develop DoD 5G capabilities. We transition 5G technologies to operational use. And overall, we operate 5G wireless technology systems and infrastructures to securely operate through comprehensive and fully integrated policies, strategies, plans, and programs. So it's a lot. But like I said, it's a fantastic mission. And it's one of those things where I've said this before. The team that I'm very fortunate enough to lead, it's a great team. We have representation from everybody. So as we talk about 5G and as we look at what 5G can do and the technologies that we're trying to adopt, you really are able to carry it from cradle to grave. So looking at the gaps that exist, all the way and providing a technical solution to it, to actually seeing it go through the budget process and actually eventually get acquired and brought into a program of reference within the services. So very high level. Very exciting team here. We are here in Crystal City, but we are located throughout the country right now. We actually have folks who are out in California and in the Midwest and just all over the place to help get this mission complete.
All right, good. A good overview. And sounds like there is a lot going on. And I've got lots of questions. Just briefly, though, you intersect or maybe come next to DISA. The Defense Information Systems Agency is also having 5G activities. Where do they end and where do you begin? And is there any cross-sharing of learnings in 5G deployment?
Oh yeah, well, so DISA has a very special place in my heart. So when I first started with the government many moons ago, DISA was the first place I started working at. So it's been great to actually continue this relationship and go from being at DISA to eventually going to OSD Comptroller, then to coming to DoD CIO. So like I said, DISA is in my heart. I know its mission in and out, which is great. Actually is to support its IA budget, or its IA budget from a budget perspective. So the cyber piece of it is integral. And this is, to your point, where does DISA intersect with the overall 5G mission and what we're trying to do? So as I alluded to in the 21 NDA, when the 5G cross-functional team was established, there was also stipulations set forth for 5G cyber requirements. And they were congressional directed requirements that stem from creating a telecommunications security program. Is that me?
No. Anyone that's not muted, please mute. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. And so in those congressional mandates, there was, I believe it was 13 cyber requirements that the department was to look at. And in those 13 requirements, one of them was specifically called out to DISA and to Cybercom. And so this is, to your point, where does DISA intersect with us? So this is just one of them, one of the great ways. So DISA and Cybercom were directed to capability for continuous and independent monitoring of non-commercial government transit packing streams. So taking a look at our private 5G networks and developing a mechanism to do continuous monitoring. So DISA took the charge back in a couple of years ago, actually, and developed a pilot program. And since then have actually developed a capability that, as we call it, the CM solution, but it's our continuous monitoring solution and a full recovery mechanism that enables DISA to do, like I said, continuous monitoring of private 5G networks. It goes beyond the initial networks that we had, or the initial use cases that we looked at. And it focuses on ensuring that the packets of data stream or the information that's being transmitted is not only validated, but the availability, the confidentiality, and the integrity of the communication system is being upheld. So that's one thing. On top of that, as you know, DISA manages our overall network, the DISM. And so what we're looking at is possibly executing a enterprise private network. And so right now, DISA has been charged to basically develop a business case analysis to, look at the art of the possible in developing what either a continuous monitoring effort would be on a private network at an enterprise level, as well as developing other cybersecurity related requirements that go to it. And so these are one of a couple of things that DISA is doing. In addition to that, and DISA has a huge portfolio. Right now, our cybersecurity office within CIO is working with DISA to institute policy that will look at defining the definitions of boundary and local defenders within the cybersecurity activities and how it's going to align DISA as well as our other CSSPs to it. And so at this point, the overall goal for that is to take a look at how 5G impacts that, validate the definitions that we're putting forward with regards to boundary and local defenders, and then helping define the additional responsibilities that DISA will take on for this effort. And so it looks at a lot of things within DISA's portfolio, especially as we look at the Thunderdome model and everything else that DISA is doing. In addition to that, one of the other tasks that we were looked at developing a an answer to is called provisional authorization. So think of provisional authorization as that attestation that you have a technology that you are willing to deploy within the department, and it's already met a certain level of security requirements, so that it's pretty much test once and done. And so that way you as a commercial provider can actually deploy that technology faster. So right now, the CFT is, and working with DISA are leading a study as well as a use case to develop this provisional authorization process so that it does that attestation, factoring in the existing NIST 800-30 controls, and looking at it not just from a cloud perspective, but also looking at the other components within the 5G architecture. So looking at the RAN and looking at the operator network. The team itself has developed a threat modeling exercise using MITRE's FIGHT, which is, if you don't know it, for those of you who are out there, I highly encourage you to get on MITRE FIGHT.
Sure.
It is the ability for commercial providers and really anybody who experiences an anomaly to go in and report those anomalies. And what happens then is NSA and our other three-letter counterparts take those anomalies and try to either further red team those efforts and develop TTPs to address them. But in this case, we're able to take some of the lessons learned from MITRE FIGHT and take those controls, develop customized parameter values, and generate implementation guidance for this provisional authorization process.
Got it.
So it's another thing that DIS is going to do for us. And so, yeah, like I said,
okay, well, that's what this is going to do, but I want to get back to your functional team because that's what we're talking about today. So maybe run through us some of what you're looking for in terms of use cases for 5G. You're looking at installations, you're looking at local networks that might be away from an installation or a base, and 5G in the tactical setting. So maybe run through some of what you
definitely. So really quick, as I kind of alluded to, the 5G CFT, we have a mission, and our mission is it's a tough word, operationalizing 5G and deploying it, right? And so the way that we've done that is we've developed a overall vision for developing and adopting 5G and getting it from the barracks to the battlefield. So a lot of folks are familiar with this, so I'll just run through it really quick, but then get into the use cases behind it. So we have 3 lines of effort that we're looking at. The first is line of effort 1, which is getting commercial 5G at DoD bases. So in its simplistic form, think of getting public 5G infrastructure around the cantonment area or around where the greater population is. So think of the barracks, think of the training centers where most of your population is at. Just you being able to pick up your phone, ensure that it works, and you have that 5G connection and you have that 5G infrastructure there. The great thing there is we focus on public networks, and we're working with the MNOs like AT&T to actually go out and build that infrastructure for us. I'm happy to call out.
That would be private, kind of a premises or campus deployment.
Think of it as not necessarily a private network. This is strictly public. So having just that public infrastructure, your regular phone working, and that anybody can use it.
You just want it locally with a good signal.
Exactly. Perfect. Great way to think about it. We have a charge to get all of our military bases by the end of calendar year 28 to have 5G infrastructure, to have that connectivity. And today we're at roughly 78%. So great news story there. Going into line of effort 2 and line of effort 3, this is where we get into the actual application of 5G. And to your point, what are those use cases that we're looking at? So line of effort 2, again, focus on the military installations and getting that 5G infrastructure beyond just that cantonment area. And this is where you have the introduction of public, private, and hybrid networks. And this is where you start to see those examples of the use cases come out. Some of the prioritized use cases that we're looking at here are just securing data and systems based off of zero trust architectures. We're looking at port line of the future, obscure transport, think of contested logistics or just overall logistic overhaul, AR, VR solutions. That's kind of what we talk about when we say line of effort 2. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on some of the things that we've actually done in just a little bit. And then line of effort 3, which is kind of what you alluded to, is our expeditionary and tactical application of 5G. Here we're looking at what 5G can do in those critical DoD missions in the expeditionary and tactical environments. Here, we're focused purely on private 5G networks that look at providing secure and resilient comms. And here, think of from the tactical manpack to the vehicle systems to integration with satellite communications and drones. This is what we're looking at in line of effort 3. Behind all of this, we also have this concept of open RAN architectures. So you'll really start to see that develop in line of effort 2 and line of effort 3. So very high level, that's, go ahead.
No, that was yeah, not
Yeah,
on.
I was gonna say
not
very
on.
high level, that's our line of efforts. But to your point, what have we done so far? So back in 21, we were established, right, within the department, and R&E held the charge of developing use cases to see what 5G could do. In total, we had roughly 37 use cases that have either been adopted, have been fielded, or we did a study and we garnered some type of information. So things that we've done, specifically in line of effort 2, you've seen the great work that we've done at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, where we completed the Lululay Naval 5G testbed back in October of 23. Is that, can you hear something in the background?
No, actually, from my standpoint, you sound great.
Okay, it sounds like I hear music, but what's it called? Beyond that, though, we were able to demonstrate resilient backhaul on an integrated network that supports RAN sharing. So that was one thing. From a tactical perspective, we've also deployed what we call Send Edge Node 5G or Send 5G. This was building on the operate through concept within INDOPACOM, and we've actually developed and deployed secure IL6, easy to operate mobile cell phone devices for joint fires operations within the tactical edge. We're also seeing, and I'm sure folks who are online know that Congress has a large interest in INDOPACOM and in the Pacific. So we've done other explorations there where we've expanded on 5G efforts within our naval base Guam, where we are implementing, designing, and testing a private 5G cellular network for asset tracking, for an asset tracking solution in Guam. We've also done, like I said, our contested logistics or overall streamlining the logistics bases, one at Albany and one at Naval Base Coronado, where we were actually able to establish a private 5G network using CBRS, shared spectrum, and developed a solution that actually incorporated actual AI, robots, and we have these great, I'm going to say, efficiencies that we've seen that we are now trying to carry into an enterprise solution. So a lot of great work that's been done throughout line of effort 2 and line of effort 3. And this is just the tip of it, right?
Sure.
There's
Well,
so
let me
much
ask
more
a
that can be
question,
done.
just backing up a notch, and that is looking at those 3 lines of effort. The first one is commercial 5G, which is enhanced by having local infrastructure to make sure that you get the best possible signal locally, because the signals aren't the same everywhere in the country. But when you talk about these tactical installations or the one in Guam where you're doing logistics, is there a source of 5G signals that can transport data that are not coming from a commercial carrier? And in other
Yes.
words, it's a technology where a box can do this, but it's not.
Yeah, so we're actually seeing some great technological solutions that are that you actually have 5G in a box that is actually able to transmit data back to us, backhaul data to us that is secure, and is actually able to transmit a lot of information, which at the end of the day is really what we need, the ability to transmit data, transmit lots of data, ensure that it's secure. And those are solutions that we're seeing widely. And so one of the things, jumping back to the team itself, I have a whole technology insertion team that focuses just on industry outreach and looking and seeing what technology solutions exist today, because their goal is really to acquire commercial off-the-shelf technologies. And as I say, zhuzh it up, put the security behind it, to then being able to rapidly deploy it. And so that team focuses on those efforts there. And so, yes, to your point, those technologies exist today. And you also have other technologies that before, where we weren't able to have international roaming capabilities or roaming with other NATO partners or other countries, we're actually able to work with that infrastructure there through the mobile network operator. We're actually able to use and leverage one of our existing cores here within domestically and actually traverse data. and you're actually able to see it securely transmitted back and forth. And so that was actually something which I was excited to be a part of, that we demonstrated back in November. So it was actually really cool.
And when you do this type of private 5G installation, and aside from acquiring equipment to do that, what is the role of industry in helping you create the solution? Again, just say the Hawaii situation or Guam, that type of thing, where it's your own 5G network.
Yeah, no, really part of what makes what we've been able to do within the department possible is the remarkable ongoing collaboration that we have between government and industry. First and foremost, industry is listening to what the gaps that the department has, and actually is taking those requirements that the department is showing, and actually providing solutions for that, and or they're looking at what the upcoming needs are and actually exhausting their own research and development funds to actually develop solutions for the government in anticipation of what our needs are. So we work hand in glove, and I've been so thankful to partner with a number of industry partners, whether at the MNO level, so the AT&Ts, the Verizons, T-Mobiles, down to the OEMs, down to the smaller industry members. But it's one of those things where you're seeing a synergistic view and a movement towards accomplishing this single effort, and that's really what we're seeing here. So to your point, what is industry doing? Well, first and foremost, and this is a testament going back to what CFT is doing within the department, we're seeing the services push forward new RFIs, new requests for information, that eventually will lead into acquisition requirements. But this is something that the services really hadn't done before. They didn't know what the art of the possible was with the 5G infrastructure that we either put on base or those capabilities. So now we're asking those questions, we're putting out what our needs are, and you're seeing industry respond very very enthusiastically. And then now we're starting to see that go forward and result in actual technologies that we're able to deploy faster.
And maybe it's a good time to talk about some of the standards work that you're doing. You have that
Oh yeah.
there are other standards, and for interoperability, especially with foreign allies.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Something.
So, as I alluded to earlier, one of the hats that I wear is I am the U.S. representative for our NATO standards operations. So we are in the midst of developing a set of what they call a STANAG. It's a set of 5G interoperable standards that we will be deploying within all of our NATO partners, so that the user or the developer actually has a set of those 3GPP specs that are common and will result in interoperability. So at a very high level, that's one of the things that I'm working on. In addition to that, though, the department under CIO, we have the charge for developing and implementing and deploying our IT standards. The CIO has the PSA authority for all IT standards development, and it falls down to me, which is really cool because I actually get to further partner with industry to look at those common set of technologies that exist today and figure out what additional things do we want to invest in, what things are important to us, and how can we set forth a common set of standards throughout 3GPP so that it actually can result in something that, going back to my discussion of purchasing commercial off-the-shelf technologies, that when we purchase something, it already has our needs baked into it. So with that, overall, within the Department of Defense, we go forward and we look at our standards, I would say our standards deployment strategy, at looking at developing a set of compelling applications or use cases that takes a look at analyzing not only what technologies exist in 3GPP, but comparing those and aligning them with DoD programs. We identify the gaps between what's commercially available and the military need. And then we establish what we call inside the department an influence timeline. We look at developing a technical gap approach. And sometimes this results in us actually developing further use cases, looking at developing modeling and simulation activities. And then we evaluate those technologies and then take those requirements and then actually build standards. So what we're focused in within the department, and this kind of leads into the technologies as we look for the future, we're prioritizing our overall efforts and standards are looking at non-terrestrial networks, looking at Silink, looking at integrated sensing and communication technologies, spectrum sharing. We're looking at MIMO, and within each one of those, we have a set of priorities under each one of what we're trying to accomplish. And so, for instance, if we were talking about non-terrestrial networks, we're looking at expanding 5G waveforms beyond the traditional ground networks, which will enable global coverage so that it can support the DoD operations in remote or contested areas, specifically looking at jamming and spoofing, resilience, GNSS, or independence. And so those are the things that we take at a very high level, then work through either proxy or working with industry to say these are the commonalities or the features that we want to see pushed, and then go forward and actually go through the whole standards contribution. And you'll see that we have support, or we're pushing standards not only in 3GPP, but also working through ETSI, through the Open RAN Alliance, as well as now with the advent of the AI RAN Alliance, we're going to start participating in that aspect as well. So a lot of great work. And a lot of technical know-how and getting down into the actual technologies itself. But at a very high level, that's our standard strategy.
It sounds as if yeah, whoever's not on mute, please mute yourself. It sounds as if the standards work can really help the development of domestic and ally country technology, and so that we in the West, if you will, for lack of a better word, stay in control of this technology for our own use, and then it lessens the, not the dependence, but the desire to use anything, say, from China, which is probably trying to do the same thing. It seems like really foundational to making sure this technology is available on Western terms and on allied terms.
Exactly.
For DoD.
And that's really the overall
use also.
Yeah, and that's really the overall goal that you see in the NATO work that we're doing, but also as we're working through 3GPP and we're working with those plenary delegates, there's a mission, there's a need to push things through. And to your point, it, especially within the NATO countries, that those standards that we're developing is to address that.
And a lot of the military, well, the armed services primarily, but a few of the other agencies are working on their particular piece of the ultimate JADC2 effort. And I imagine the work you're doing in 5G is somehow going to inform those efforts and be part of what eventually gets deployed. I'm thinking that's going to be a 25-year effort, but right now we're a few years.
As long as you say that, that means I have a job for a while. So I'm very excited to hear
I
you
think
say
you're
that.
safe. I think you're safe. All these things take 10 times longer than anyone thought. But
exactly.
Maybe talk about the relationship of what's going on in the 5G world and your cross-functional team to that overarching DoD effort in comms.
Yeah. So overall,
and
5G.
C2.
Yeah, no, overall, as you look at 5G is an enabler. It is an enabler for all technologies. As we look at CJADC2 and even looking at our national defense strategy to the actual priorities within the CIO's capability planning guidance, 5G is that underlying architecture and modernization effort that affects, I would say, almost everything. It enables us to transmit data safer, faster, and get it down to the warfighter so that we have that warfighter advantage. And so with regards to 5G and how we influence, as I said, we're an enabler. We touch everything. And so at its very high level, we are wrapped into a lot of things. Sometimes it's hard to put us down just one effort, as we know, there's a lot of things that are going on. More recently, our COCOMs did a gap analysis, and a lot of the issues that we're seeing or the gaps that exist in one form or fashion can be addressed, whether it's through network modernization efforts or through implementation of 5G requirements. Now, the goal is who has the checkbook for it. And so that's the hard part. And that's really what the CFT is also striving to do. So as I kind of alluded to back when I started with DISA, I have over 19 years of budgetary experience. So one of the things that the team I've charged them with is not only helping to identify those gaps and how to mitigate those gaps, but how to budget for those gaps. And so that's the other part that we're looking at, is going through the overall president's budget review process. How do you go about getting money to not only initially kick off your requirements, but also look at sustaining those requirements within your baseline? So we're coming at it from a holistic approach, not only what technologies can address it and enable CJASC2, but also how do we budget for it.
And I want to switch topics here for a minute and get back to something you mentioned very early on, that your team is a sec dev operation. Dev
Yes.
sounds like development. And what does sec dev mean in the context of 5G standards work and deployment work and use case work?
So at the end of at the very heart of it, the CFT, the cross-functional team, whether it's the 5G one or the other three that exist, we are SecDef empowered organizations. So in a perfect world, we actually have reporting authority to the Secretary of Defense. And so
Oh, you said sec def, not sec dev.
Yeah, SecDef.
Oh, well, then I withdraw the question because I heard it as sec dev. I heard it twice as sec dev. So we'll
Oh,
withdraw
I
the question.
apologize. No,
Secretary of
SecDef,
Defense. You don't
SecDef.
have coders and people and so forth in your teams.
No, no, no. I mean, we actually, some of my folks are actually super smart. So they're the technologists behind it. So they make me look smarter. But no, to your point, we do have SecDef reporting authority. It's just at the end of the day, if it's a priority for them, and we actually are seeing technology, especially as President Trump, when he discussed with Japan and Open RAN, those things are continuing. And so as long as it's a priority for them, we're able to accomplish our mission.
Okay. Now, I want to ask about another type of use case which comes up in many comms types of discussions, and that is the Internet of Things. And you have person-to-person communications, often in a tactical environment, but there's also sensor data and so on. What is it about 5G, I guess, that it enables that? And what is it about 5G generally that makes this something to focus on so carefully relative to 4G or 3G? Or I guess there was no such thing as 4G, but whatever it says on
Yeah, no.
5G isn't there.
So yeah, no, as DoD continues to explore how it can take full advantage of 5G, we're starting to see the emergence of red capability chipsets, which is an exciting new development and something that we're looking into. We have come up with a variety of use for 5G, many of which we know enables connectivity for devices that aren't your traditional smartphone or your tablet. And so as we're looking at these RedCap chipsets, it opens up a whole new entire class of devices, such as sensors that could take advantage of massive connectivity for 5G and also provide a wealth of DoD knowledge on what the chipset is embedded in. So to your point, it's at the end of the day, it is now more than smartphone or tablets. It's actually a lot of other things. And so that's really what we're looking at now. It's going beyond that line of effort 1 and that mobility aspect of it to now what can we do in line of effort 2 and line of effort 3.
And in the tactical situation or the IoT situation, any kind of data transfer, what about encryption? What about security? What about sniffing ability of the opposition to ferret out signals, because you're talking about a radio frequency signal going through the air?
Yeah, no, I mean, that at its heart, that's another thing that is embedded within the CFT. So we have a whole arm that is focused just on 5G cyber. So as I alluded to back when in the 21 NDA, there was, I think it's a total of, I think I might have misspoke. It wasn't 16. It was actually 7 things that we were supposed to look at from a cyber perspective. It's now enhanced. And so we are looking at the overall, how can you harden the network? Whether it's in your line of effort 1 deployments all the way through line of effort 3. So we actually have policy that is, fingers crossed, and in Juan's perfect world, it'll be signed out in the next month or so. But it actually provides those extra layers of encryption needs that are going to be baked into our standards, so that as you have different deployments, whether it's in your public infrastructure all the way down to your private, you're actually seeing those hardened, secure networks come into play. So that's just one thing that we're looking at. In addition to that, though, you're actually able to see what, for instance, drones can do, or as we're looking at counter UAS and what we're looking at integrated sensing and capabilities, what they can do to further look at additional information, bring that information back, and make our warfighters smarter and be able to address what I'll say certain things in certain outfits. And that's kind of the other application of 5G that we're looking at, especially as we get into line of effort 3.
Right. So 5G can do things that prior generations of wireless comms could not do.
Correct. So like now we're looking at counter UAS, we're looking at multi-static radar, identifying RMF locators, making this all possible through drones. Yeah, ton of different things that we're looking at.
And how do you envision the U.S. military keeping the advantage in something that's out there for anyone? Anyone in the world can use 5G technology. What's the mechanism by which the advantage stays with the United States?
So that's when we get into the security enhancements that are inherent to our deployments, our tactical deployments. So one of the things that we were charged with back in the last NDA was developing a private network deployment strategy. And in that, we provide that guide and that mechanism to say, depending on what your 5G need and requirements are, this is how you deploy your private network, correct? But in part of that, it helps you look at not only the actual application of 5G, but also the security requirements behind it. And so as you get into that security piece of it and actually what you're trying to accomplish with 5G, especially in the tactical realm, that's really where we'll maintain our superiority, is looking at from a cyber perspective, how is it that we are doing secure and resilient transfer of data.
But beyond security, the design of the application and the cleverness with which it is applied, I would think is something.
Exactly. How are you going to actually use 5G? And what we have seen before is that everybody just wanted 5G. 5G was the go-to, right? Now we're actually able to talk about what exactly we're trying to accomplish with 5G. And in developing those requirements, that's where you'll see those next generation applications or communication capabilities being developed.
All right, here's a question coming in, well, actually from Stephen. He's wondering the 5G, how the team has evolved, changed on what you've heard from the Secretary of Defense for a month, Pete Hegseth. What has changed, if anything, for the cross-functional team?
We are still pushing forward on accomplishing our mission. We haven't been told to change. In fact, we've seen support, especially support from our industry partners, and just knowing what we're trying to accomplish. And as I alluded to earlier, where we have President Trump talking about Open RAN and actually voicing his support for that, we're trying to ensure that those requirements are built into our overall strategy, which they are. And so we're just continuing to push out.
And already we're hearing from industry discussion of the next generation beyond 5G going to 6G and 7G, I've heard.
Yep.
I'm not sure what form those would take or what that actually means, but how do you make sure that you are going to have the technology insertion or inculcation needed to make sure that it's cross-functional team and not just 5G?
Correct. That's always been one of the things that I just take personally. So not just within the 5G CFT, but overall providing the solution. So in some cases, you have a 4G solution that'll meet your immediate need today. So I always took it upon myself when I took over this role as a director that, yes, we are focused on 5G, but if there is a G that answers the need and can be deployed and readily deployed, that's what we look at. And that's what we try to push forward. To your question, though, on what we're doing with 6G and future G, we are we are partnering really well with our counterparts in OUSD R&E. My counterpart, Dr. Tom Rondeau, he's the principal director for the Future G office. And so as they are looking at what Future G technologies exist, there's a natural flow from 5G into Future G. So we're working hand in glove with them, taking a look at the use cases that they're looking at, and ensuring that there is a transition path to like build in and bring forth that technology and showcase it to the services. In addition to that, as we were talking about standards, we know standards don't just stop, and they're not going to stop just at 5G. In fact, we are trying to close up release 19, which is focused on 5G advanced technologies and standards, and now looking to release 20, which is introducing 6G technologies and 6G standards. So my team is actively looking at it. One of the prioritized requirements that we are seeing within the department going back is that integrated sensing and capabilities, and what influences that will have within 6G technology. So a lot of work, a lot of research and development. I know my counterparts have done an RFI to industry and academia, And so there's a great partnership that we have. And it's one of those things, communication can go a long way.
Right. That gets to the point that you look even beyond what is happening in commercial development to what's happening in the R&D laboratories and even academic grant research. I imagine there is sources of data and information about future communications.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Um, You mentioned earlier that the services define the requirements and you help them fulfill that. How do you ensure that that the development of requirements by the services makes sense for what you know is possible with some of these technologies? They might say, well, we need 10,000 people to communicate 5 petabytes a second with zero latency. I'm making this up, but
No, I get what you mean. No,
po-
we have great technical teams, and so technical exchanges. Case in point, we just recently awarded our Fort Bliss Open RAN our Open RAN solicitation. And one of the things in there was just to ensure that we have commercial connectivity available. And so what we've done is, obviously, as you go through a solicitation, you don't know what the art of the possible is until you actually get into the defining the actual the needs, or actually looking at the engineering solution. So similar to any other program of reference, my team, they have the technical know-how, they know the makeup behind it, but also working with industry to get their takes. So if I have a need to have commercial radiate or 5G infrastructure or 5G signal radiating within a certain distance, I may think that I need 10 mini towers or micro towers, and it turns out one macro tower can satisfy it. And having that discussion has just saved me X, millions of dollars. So those kind of conversations we have regularly as we're going through and defining the overall needs from a gap perspective and looking at the solutions. We are doing that industry outreach to say, okay, what is in the art of the possible, so that we can help scope our future solicitations so that we get better to answering the mail. So it's just your standard, making sure you have the right engineering folks, having the consistent tech discussions, and then working with the services to further define, when you say you need 5G, what do you really mean by that?
sure. And you might have to tell them sometimes, well, you'll have to wait to 7G on that particular requirement.
Exactly. Or you're able to move things to the left, which at the end of its day, if a service hears that and they're able to move it to the left, that's it, you're saving everybody time and effort.
All right. Here's a question that came in from the audience. Can you provide a synopsis of the DoD's plans to deploy and manage a 5G core, manage and operate? And when, where would this be for LOE2 and LOE3? I don't know what that means. You do, but 5G core, LOE2, LOE3 question.
Yeah, so that was going back
Lines
to
of effort, I guess.
yeah, how is DISA getting involved? So right now we're in the midst of doing a business case analysis to see if there is a need to have a single private 5G core. And so we're evaluating that. The study is supposed to end at the end of this fiscal year. And then if it does result, or if it makes sense, then actually go through the whole PBR process. But what we're seeing is that may not be the answer. What tech, or what our MNOs, what we're able to see be provided, and leveraging the existing core infrastructure that is out there, may in the long run make more sense, because it's, from a cost perspective, makes more sense to leverage the infrastructure that AT&T's already developed, that T-Mobile has already invested in, and then just ride on top of that network and either look at doing a private network or a hybrid network slice, and or look at leveraging their requirements and then just building in those additional security enhancements that I've talked to.
Yeah, I think
So it
that
just depends.
I remember admirals of a generation earlier that used to say, all we need is our own private fiber optical network for the entire military. I can do it for the cost of a carrier, but it turns out technology moves too fast and you don't want to have
Exactly.
sunk capital cost in something that's aging before you get the last connection already done. And this follow-up question is, and this relates to what you mentioned earlier about rapid acquisition is part of your kind of activities. What are your contract vehicles? Where do you look to find to buy this capability?
Yeah, so it depends. That's my favorite answer, especially working from the budget side. It really depends. But what we've seen is we're leveraging OTAs, or other transaction authority acquisition paths, for the faster adoption and deployment of our capabilities, as well as our acquisition needs. We're also seeing the adoption of and further use of acquisition or current acquisition paths like the Spiral 4 contract. So for those of you who don't know the Spiral 4 contract, the original intent of that was to ensure that there was a path to get your mobile device, right? We have now built into it the ability to start acquiring those needs or those additional use cases that we would see in line of effort 2 and line of effort 3. So ensuring that there is a path that, one, you can purchase it, but then two, the carrier are able to actually build in that requirement as a service rather than you having to deal with the CapEx. So we're looking at stuff or other acquisition paths like that. We're also partnering with DIU and the JRAC, the Joint Rapid Acquisition. I forget what C stands for, but working with them to ensure that we are making full use of the other acquisition things that exist today, for instance, the Raider or the Replicator initiatives. And so those are all different paths that we're looking at to quickly deploy, but also working with the industry members to figure out, is there another means for us to get stuff out there? So what we've done within the CFT more specifically is we've developed an acquisition playbook, and it's actually built out several vignettes to say, if you wanted to go out and purchase this is the fast way to do it, and this is how you can go about doing it. So another great thing that the CFT has done.
Wow. Okay. Acquisition playbook. I like that one. Another question. We have a few more minutes here. We heard from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense is going to reach out to industry on NTN. Usually they want TNT in the military. This is NTN. Again, I confess I don't know what that stands for, Mr. Chin, but anyway, can you comment on the status of the DoD, what they're looking for NTN? I can probably guess what it means. Prototype, demonstration, and acquisition.
Yeah, no. So
Non-terrestrial networks. Thank you.
Yeah, non-terrestrial networks. That's what he's referencing. So last month, actually, last month, my boss, actually, one of the CIO leaders, presented at the Executive Mosaic R&D Summit and dropped the hint that we were actually going and doing a 5G non-terrestrial network strategy and deep dive. And so looking at what we can do, how we can maximize and adopt NTN commercial available technologies within the department to meet certain needs. And so that study kicked off a couple of months ago. And the goal is for us to quickly turn around and provide a recommendation so that we are in line with the overall PBR 27 POMI plan. And so my counterparts are actually, they meet on a weekly basis. So I know that it's kicking off and it's moving forward, but with regards to when it will end, I believe it's in the next 2 to 3 months. And then there should be a report that's put out, and then working with the correct MILDEPs to start planning and budgeting for it is the next steps.
All right, one more question that I've got, and it relates to that idea of non-terrestrial. Non-terrestrial means space too in some context. Is there a space satellite component to any of this?
Yeah, so as we look at it, we're not just focused on your traditional land and maritime overall, I'm blanking on the word, the domains. We're actually looking at it at a holistic. So we're also looking at space, and we're looking at the cyber domains and other domains that exist with regards to the technological implementation of what we're trying to accomplish. So yes, there is an inherent piece to satellite and to SATCOM. As I alluded to earlier, 5G is an enabler of these technologies. So you'll see it influence not only your position, navigation, and timing, but also what we're trying to accomplish with SATCOM and overall fallback options that we have, whether it's through MANET or through mesh.
All right. And so, well, we could go on and on about different levels. We are running right up to 11:29 and the end of our session. So I want to thank you, Juan, for encyclopedic knowledge about these things. And I'm glad you're on the job because we don't know that much. And so my thanks to the audience, and let's turn it back to Stephen Mathern.
So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Juan, Tom, thank you so much for spending some time with ACT-IAC and specifically with the N&T COI this morning. Juan, thank you so much for your service and what you do for our nation and and for this industry, and all of the work supporting the development and operationalizing 5G throughout the DoD. Tom, thanks.
I'm glad you struggle with that word too.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's getting contagious, isn't it? But for those of you on the line, I do trust you enjoyed the session this morning. This will be made available for replay. But Juan, thanks so much. Tom, thanks again. And for those of you who are looking for how to get involved in ACT-IAC, please make sure you pay attention to the calendar of events and volunteer. Again, this is a volunteer organization. Please raise your hand, step forward, and help work between industry and government to facilitate the overall mission of government. Thanks so much, y'all. You'll have a wonderful rest of the day.